Great, thank you. Kia ora. This is a Maori greeting that we use in New Zealand. Commonly it means hello and welcome. And for us, thank you so much for inviting us here. It's lovely to be part of you all. I'm joined on stage here with my colleagues from New Zealand, Dr. Aniebietabasi Ackley, who has a PhD in architecture, Lauren Smith, who is our Manager of Strategic Asset Management, and myself, I'm Director of School Design. I am an architect and I have a master's degree in sustainable architecture. So, we'll be sharing our presentation. I'm starting off, and so we will move on to the next slide, which I'm doing myself. So this is what we'll be covering today a little bit about. We're going to talk a bit about our school building portfolio, our geography. I don't know how many of you know where New Zealand is, but we're quite a small country and we're quite far away. We'll talk a bit about the school property strategy for 2030. We've got some images of school buildings to share with you. Our design standards frameworks, many of you have discussed having the same thing with your school portfolios as well. A little bit about, or in fact quite a lot, about our COVID-19 ventilation studies, which were quite intense, very progressive, very thorough, and have really influenced where we're going in the future. So we also have our short and long-term strategies, which again is tying in where we're going to be going in our future and improving our system performance. So New Zealand, here we are. We are right at the bottom of the world. We're a long, thin piece of land, rather like Japan perhaps, comprising two main islands. It's surrounded by ocean. It's located at the bottom of the world, just above Antarctica. The nearest landmass is the continent of Australia to our west, and way across the ocean to the east is South America. So compared to, it's a country exposed to the cold polar blasts from the Antarctic, as well as the tropical storms that are driven down from the tropical South Pacific. So that has a big impact on our weather, and also on our air. We're fortunate that we have a lot of very fresh air and a lot of great things for us. We have 6 climatic zones. A little bit about the country. We're small. We're about 270,000 square metres. The population is only 5 million, which is quite small. The majority of the population would be in Auckland, which is in the North Island. And there are 23 million sheep. There you go. Looked up that little bit of details. So we actually have a lot of rural land. We're quite intense in the main cities of Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch, but other than that there is a lot of rural area. So a little bit about our portfolio. We have 2,100 schools, of which there's 16,500 school buildings, 37,500 teaching spaces, and that's over about 8,000 hectares of land. We're the second largest social property portfolio in New Zealand. Our book value is 28 billion. There's a few other figures there that I'll let you read through. I'm just thinking here. Yeah, a value of 28 million. It's a priority for the Ministry of Education to strategically asset manage this appropriately on behalf of the Crown. So a little bit about our school property strategy. This strategy sets out a vision of all schools to have quality learning environments as part of a well-managed and sustainable portfolio that helps deliver equitable and excellent outcomes for every child. New Zealand prioritised warm, safe and dry learning spaces and seeks to deliver them cost-effectively, providing solutions through sustainable design, adopting a student-centred approach. The focus remains on supporting well-being and enhancing academic outcomes. So our key elements, people have mentioned before, but that's really critical for us. They include optimal indoor air quality, ventilation, acoustics, daylight, low energy and carbon effective designs, creating adaptable spaces that foster inclusive and engaging learning spaces. This slide here is a little bit about our school design standards framework. In New Zealand, as most countries, we would have a building code that covers typical buildings, but it does not specialise in educational outcomes. where there is the need for acoustics or specialist lighting. There's a number of things that are quite specific to us. So we've established, over and above that building code, our own Designing Schools in Aotearoa, New Zealand, which is a principal school design requirement document. This is a lead document in a suite of design standards and guideline documents, and it provides clear expectations for the planning and design of schools. The more technical documents addressing indoor air quality and seismic design sit beneath this document and are significantly important given educational outcome and climatic and geographical considerations. So in this diagram here, you'll see this is the way that the framework breaks up. We've got design principles, which are school property principles, and design process principles, and then that drops down into spatial planning as well as the technical standards for school property. And then underneath that, and we're developing this more and more, is our building product and component requirements. Sorry, excuse me. So that full suite of documents can be accessed from the property pages of our website. So this slide here just is a few illustrations of some of our school buildings. These are some of our more repeatable designs. You'll see that one particularly on the left has a bit of Maori influence in terms of the way it's articulated at the front, but these are our repeatable designs that we're starting to roll out throughout the country. Quite volumetric, probably, by comparison to some of the schools we've seen, they are very low scale, but that's just New Zealand at the moment. So I will pass you on now to Dr. Ackley, who will take you through the next slides.
Thanks, Renelle, and good afternoon, everyone. In this section of the presentation, I'm going to delve into some of our learnings from our COVID-19 ventilation studies. In New Zealand, the Ministry of Education aims to ensure that all schools provide quality learning environments by the year 2030. This is to enable our students and our teachers to thrive in environments that support their success. To achieve this, we've developed a model which helps us in assessing quality across 3 pillars. One of the pillars is the condition assessment, the assessment of our site-wide and also the building element. The next pillar is operational efficiency, which has to do with the efficient use of energy in terms of lighting, in terms of heating, in terms of cooling, as well as space utilization. We also have the fitness for purpose pillar. This pillar involves the deployment of internal environmental monitoring tools into classrooms to evaluate the environmental factors such as acoustics, lighting, thermal comfort, indoor air quality, and ventilation, which are key factors in enhancing educational outcomes. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we utilized the fitness for purpose, there's a pillar where we use CO2 monitors to assess classroom ventilation. This was done in collaboration with experts and the researchers from universities, and the aim was for us to create an evidence-based self-assessment approach for schools, empowering them to optimize ventilation. As Renelle highlighted in slide 3, New Zealand's mild climate allows us to maximize our outdoor environment for most of the year. Most of our school buildings are naturally ventilated, and during the pandemic, there were concerns about the impact of natural ventilation during winter on thermal comfort. To address these concerns, we conducted real-world experiments to assess ventilation levels across schools in New Zealand. You can already see the key findings from our studies, where we found that on warm days, good ventilation in our schools is achievable by opening your windows and doors. And on cold days, by partially opening your window by at least 5 cm, you can still achieve adequate ventilation with a minimal loss of heat. We also evaluated the use of portable air cleaners, which are the little devices that you can place in a space for the filtration. We found that while air cleaners are useful for air filtration needs, it cannot replace ventilation because they don't provide fresh air or reduce CO2 levels. Overall, this diagram compares the ventilation methods and summarizes achievable air change rates from the studies conducted in New Zealand. Based upon the lessons we learned from those studies, as well as our design review studies we've been doing, and the current trends in the industry, we updated our designing quality learning spaces standards. On the screen are the cover pages of our ventilation standards and indoor air quality and thermal comfort standard. These standards are freely available online and can be accessed from anywhere in the world. Considering the seasonal variations, we developed both short-term and long-term strategies to achieve good internal environmental quality in our schools. Before the pandemic, which you can see the pre-pandemic era, the focus was on winter heating and on summer cooling. During the pandemic, between 2022 and 2023, the priority shifted to assessing fresh air. Today, we effectively monitor and track indoor environmental quality in our schools. I would add up in this slide to say that this evolution reflects a shift from partially pre-informed pandemic actions to research-driven quantified strategies, which is part of what we've seen in the school visits we did in Japan yesterday. To help our schools to better understand ventilation needs and also to maintain quality learning environment, we have IEM devices installed in our classrooms. These devices have a display screen, as you can see, where it is very possible for the student and the classroom, the teachers, to know what the CO2 level is on real time. It's also possible for them to know how hot or cold the space is real time, and also helps them to take an action to ensure a comfortable environment. The devices also centrally report on data to us at the ministry, and we use this data for proactive asset management and investment decisions. As the saying goes, what gets monitored gets well managed, making these IEMs an essential tool for ensuring warm, safe, and dry learning spaces. I will now hand over to my colleague Lauren, who will discuss improvement in system performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ackley. Kia ora. As mentioned, I'm Lauren. I'm manager of our strategic asset management team. Hopefully that's loud and you can all hear me. So the Ministry of Education in New Zealand, we have a property function which is around 750 staff. We operate in a devolved model. So in New Zealand, that means the ministry is the asset owner, and we're responsible for setting the strategic direction, the policies, the guidelines, and the standards that the school property portfolio must operate and manage within. We're also responsible for undertaking long-term planning, so understanding the performance of our assets. We're responsible for working with the government to access funding and then allocate that across our schools equitably. And we're also responsible for delivering some of our larger, more complex projects on behalf of schools. Schools themselves are responsible for the day-to-day management of school properties. So as well as delivering education, our principals are also responsible for making sure the painting of the buildings is undertaken, for example, or that they are delivering the smaller capital renewals to maximise the life of our assets. In New Zealand, we have a lot of ageing assets, so over 60% of our portfolio is between 30 and 100 years old. Combined with that, we actually have a growing population, so we have a large number of migrants coming into New Zealand each year. And by 2030, we needed to have provided an additional 100,000 student places. So that's a significant challenge for us. And many of those students are in our urban areas, which are already, the schools are already at capacity. So we have a large growth challenge that we're working with. Our teaching spaces that we're delivering post-COVID, we were seeing costs ballooning up to $1 million New Zealand dollars per teaching space. So at the rate we're needing to grow our portfolio, that figure was unsustainable to us, and we needed to bring that down. We now have a target rate of $850,000 per student place, teaching space, sorry. So that's a reduction of 25% in our delivery costs that we're trying to achieve. So for us, it's really about ensuring that all schools across New Zealand have well-ventilated, quality learning environments that have adequate capacity. And that requires a data-driven and mature asset management approach across our portfolio. We must ensure that long-term planning is robust and that the funding we receive and allocate to our schools is targeted to the schools or the areas that have the greatest need. So to do that, the Ministry is undertaking quite a significant program to actually change the way we operate. We're looking to really change how we work with communities in our schools and actually how we work internally. For us, that's being really clear on the standards that we expect from our assets. So as Ackley talked about in his section, we have 3 pillars, which is condition, fitness for purpose, and operational efficiency. We need to understand how well our assets are performing across those and plan to improve those assets that are not meeting those standards. We're also improving our delivery method. So we're taking a really big focus now away from bespoke designs because we were finding that they were quite expensive, and rather learning from what we've already delivered and creating standard repeatable solutions. So that means we can much more time efficient and cost efficiently deliver growth in the areas that need it. We're also trialling an increased use of what we call off-site manufactured buildings. So classrooms are built in factories away from the school, and we import them built on big cranes, and we can just put them into our school buildings. So we're finding that a very cost-efficient and timely way to meet the growth demands that our schools are seeing. And lastly, we're also having a much larger increased focus on our maintenance. So from a sustainability lens, these assets are long-lived infrastructure, and we need to make sure that we're appropriately maintaining them so that we can maximise their potential. And given the devolved model, there's a huge responsibility on schools to be maintaining these assets when their priority is educational activities. So the Ministry has a big focus on what we should be doing and how we can better support schools to undertake maintenance. And lastly, we want to do all of this so that these improvements enable us to provide well-ventilated, warm, safe and dry quality learning environments for all students. Thank you.